Friends, before I get started, we're going to be talking today. We do these True Charity luncheons about once a quarter, and we have these conversations around different areas of charity. And today we're going to talk about effective charity. But I want to communicate right up front when I'm talking about effective charity, this is not to imply that anybody necessarily doing it wrong, that we're going to, or attacking anybody. That's not what our real purpose here today is to do. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk about 7 marks of effective charity. So if you can apply, the more of these that you apply to your ministry, to your organization, to your business, the more of those you apply, the more effective that you're going to be. And by effective, what we're defining effective as long term. Because you end up with more outcomes, great outcomes, rather than just outputs. And the kind of the ideas are going to come from a couple different places. Primarily today we're going to talk about the tragedy of American compassion, specifically chapter 6. So if you don't read the whole book, it's a history book. So history nerds like me, we'd love it. If you don't love history, you may not love that book. But chapter 6 would be very beneficial to understand what we're talking about. It also kind of ties in with When Helping Hurts. We're going to come back and talk a little bit more about this book as well. But we're doing all that. So when we're talking about effective charity, again, we're talking about outcomes versus output. We're talking about long-term success. We're also looking at, if it's going to be effective, we have to be able to instill hope into people's lives. Hope that tomorrow is going to be better than today. Hope that they have a place to live, some stability in the future, something that's going to be long-term for them, not just for a moment, but for long-term. We're also wanting to instill hope that they have a values, they have talents, they have skills that get applied and used in our community. They have those abilities, whether they're living on the streets or living in a house not meant for human habitation, or they're staying at a low-income housing, wherever they're at, they have something to give. And if we don't give them that opportunity, our work is going to be much less effective than if they're able to do all that. And I want to share a little bit about the power of hope, because really that's what we're hoping to instill and put out and make that happen. And so Robert Kennedy, the original Robert Kennedy, I'm going to I didn't used to have to clarify that, but the original Robert F. Kennedy said, each time a man stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. And crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples build a current that can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. So bottom line of what I'm saying today, what I actually am implying, is that if we give out enough hope to people in our community, it's going to have an avalanche, a flood of change that's going to take place. Some people won't like that change because they'll be uncomfortable. But the truth is, it will be better for all of us when these changes start to take place and oppression starts to get crushed down in that. So our 7 marks that we're going to talk about, they come from the tragedy of American compassion. Marvin Lasky has several great books, but this is the one we're basing this one off of. And these are not in any particular order as far as prevalence and how important they are. They're in alphabetical order. So that's how you win in this game, have an A in your name versus other places. So these are the first 4 we're going to talk about. Affiliation, bonding, categorization, and discernment. So affiliation. Affiliation is basically this. It's closer, near is going to be better help. Let's just imagine that I'm having a heart attack right now. If I am having a heart attack, I am certainly hoping that my friend Tom is going to call Governor Stitt and say, come and take care of that. I don't know where Governor Stitt is today, but odds are he's about 3.5, 4 hours away at best. If I'm having a heart attack, I'm in trouble if I have to wait for him to make his way over here. I don't even know if he knows CPR. I've never asked him that question. I've never heard from him. He's never made that part of his speeches. I'm hoping. I want it to be closer. So ideally, somebody in this room can give me first aid CPR. I know there's a handful of people. We have that as part of our program. We teach men and women who are here. If they're here after a certain amount of time, they've learned first aid and CPR. So I'm hoping that somebody in this room could do it. But just say I happen to be in a class and nobody knows. I'm in this room and none of you know how to do it. I'm in trouble. I'm hoping that at least 2 blocks away, we got the ambulance going to come. Hopefully they can get over here. But it may be unfortunate for me that all the ambulances are out helping other people. I'm getting deeper and deeper trouble. But then, I can go to the hospital. Somebody can give me a ride and go over there. But you see how it gets further and further away, longer and longer that I'm not getting the help. And as a past medic, we know that there's a golden hour of help. If you get help in the first hour, your odds of survival go up exponentially. Well, I need to get the help right away. When we're talking about our charity and our effectiveness, we want to make sure we're reaching out in such a way that the closer near is going to be better. So the individual is going to be responsible. We need to empower them, strengthen them, so you have something in you to help solve your problem. Don't have to do it on your own. We're here to walk with you. We can't do it for you. We don't want to do it to you. We want to do it with you. And so the individual has to be empowered to be part of their solution. Then we have the family. Sometimes you can't quite pull it off on your own. You need that support of something close by. You need that support. And if your program can somehow tie in family, friends that are close by and start drawing them in, that's much more effective. Now, true that a lot of the men and women we serve here, their families aren't going to be that safe. I've had enough conversations to know that's not going to be a good option. My mother's still in addiction, or my sister is in the house and she steals for everything. I mean, there's all sorts of incredible things. Maybe their abuser is a family member. They can't go back to all that. That's all a fair place. But we ask them to look for, is there a great aunt or a grandmother or a distant cousin, somebody that you can implement into all that. Somebody who knew you when you were a child can be part of that process. It's going to be much more effective when you have a family member part of it. And if you happen to be part of a local tribe, any of the native tribes, you can get them connected with you on that. There's a bond that takes place that can be very effective. And then you have faith groups. Those faith groups can come around and they can be part of that whole program. And then ultimately the government. So I want to share with you a little bit. I helped my daughter move last Saturday. And we all went over there. We had a lot of family there. We were the first people there with her, helping her move all in. First of all, she had to be responsible for making the payment on the house. So she's buying a house. Her and her husband are taking care of all that. They're individually responsible. They had to pick out the house. They picked out the decorations that they wanted for their new house. All those sort of things. But the family came around and surrounded. We were able to serve her and help her and make this a much more effective move. But also, when we got there, we had a whole lot of boxes, and we were also trying to remodel their flooring and paint walls. And if you ever moved to a new house and you don't like what was there, there's a lot of stuff happening. So I'm scraping the floor. My son-in-law is putting down the floor. My in-laws are on a ladder painting the walls, and my 4-year-old granddaughter is going around telling me, "You're doing a good job." That was her job all day. You did a good job. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. She put her house dust. We could all leave. But there was other boxes that need to be moved. So her church groups, people from her church, all came over there helping move boxes and do all that. And then the government, they gave us some good roads to get over there to their neighborhood to do it. If we don't have the roads, they gave the infrastructure, so they have sewer and water and all those things come in their house. So everybody's part of the process. But it wasn't going to depend on Uncle Sam to get the moving truck all loaded up and move them in. And so we're talking about actually caring for people. We want to get as closer and near as we possibly can, knowing that sometimes we may have to go to the outer circle for that support. Bonding. Again, alphabetical order, this is next, but really I think this is one of the most important. It's getting to know the men and women you're trying to give charity to. You can't effectively help somebody you haven't taken the time to get to know. Think about that when you see a panhandler. How well do you get to know that panhandler? You might even look at in the eyes. You might even look at their face. You might not be able to recognize them an hour later because you didn't really look at them. We want to get to know people before you actually give that sort of care. But what tends to happen, and what I see in a lot of organizations, and I've been guilty of this as well, so I'm not pointing fingers again. This is one of those things that just common humanity, we mess this up, is we tend to look at the addiction, mental illness side, or a small dysfunction on it. That's what we focus in on. And so if you imagine you're standing on that circle looking back at that as the addiction, mental illness side, that's almost all you're going to see of a person. And you can't really help them if all that you're going to see is that side. But you notice there's a whole lot more blue in this picture. My son-in-law's got color blindness. Your color blindness, that's the big portion. So I'm becoming sensitive to some of these things I didn't used to think about. But the big portion of the circle, there's a whole lot more to people than their dysfunctions. A whole lot more to them than just their addictions or their mental illness or anything else you're saying. There's a whole lot more to them than all that. But we focus on that side, that's all we think about. I just got to help them with this, and that's going to solve all their problems, which isn't true. Now, at the old mission, I think Spanky left us. So, Tucker, can you help people pick tables to go ahead and get their meals? Pick table by table as we go along. But we had a guy from the old mission when we worked there. His name was James. And James was a great guy. I met him. He was in his early 50s. He seemed old at the time, but now in my 50s, he was a kid. But James was there at the mission, and we got to know him. We were doing this bond. We're getting to know who he is. And so James shares with me, well, I've been a roofer since he was a teenager. So he's probably starting as an assistant, probably just picking up scraps on the ground, but eventually he's on the roof all the time. From he's 16, 17 years old, all the way up to his 50s, he's on a roof. And he loved it. He had a passion for it. He thought it was a great job, except for he had this problem where he kept falling off the roof. And, after a while, and hitting his head, it seemed that every story has him hitting his head. It was never him landing on his legs or breaking a leg. It was always his head. maybe those are the ones he can remember. I don't know how that all played out. But the truth is that he was afraid to get back on the roof. And he was just going to wait around for disability. And he was going to, I was going to collect disability, and that's all I'm going to do. Well, that's a long process for that. It takes sometimes years to pull that off. And so we're going to work with him, figure out how to do that. But in the meantime, well, what can you do, James? You don't want to get on a roof. I get that. That totally makes sense. I'd be in your same shoes. I get it. But you know what? What do you love? What can you do? What kind of skills do you have? And so I challenge us as organizations that we want to have an effective charity to them. We got to find out about them. What can you do? There's very little I can do with his unwillingness, inability to get on the roof. So I said, what can you do? And James said, on the side, I was building shelving and carpentry. I love building things. And I would do it for my family and friends when I wasn't on the roof. And I loved it. It was like a side hustle that he sometimes made a little money, but mostly he did it out of love. Had compassion for this. He thought it was the greatest thing he could ever do. And I said, well, by the way, James, I happen to have a need for some shelving. And so could you build us something? That's not always going to happen, but it happened in this case. And I said, James, build us the shelf. And I showed him where it was. I bought him some of the wood, and he puts this shelving together. And most people would have slapped a few boards together and called it good. But he built something that's going to be industrial. It's probably still in that building. I don't know if they can get it out of the building because it was pretty tough. And it was actually attractive. It wasn't just a piece of work thrown together. It was attractive work. Well, it just so happened that about a week or two later, I'm giving a tour. And somebody notices the cabinetry, the shelving that James had made. And they said, well, that's kind of nice. Where'd you get that? And I said, well, this guy James, he's staying at the Mission. He's actually in the dining room right now. He built this a few weeks ago. What do you think? And he goes, like, this is incredible. I happen to own a carpentry company. I'm looking for workers. Can you introduce me to James? Well, he took James out to lunch. They had this long conversation. And next thing I know, James is working for the guy. And he ended up delaying his getting disability for about 5 or 6 years. That brain injury did eventually kind of take control of that. But he had 5 or 6 years of great opportunity to give his passion, give his desires out, and be part of the community. And that's what happens when we bond. We can actually let them have a longer time of connection with our community. Our next one is categorization. Now, this is one who tends to get me in the most trouble. Because we tend to think, well, we're not treating everybody the same. We're not being equal. The truth is that everybody's not the same. Their needs are not the same. If you can think about this as I was a medic in the Army, and we learned how to triage situations. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about categorizations. I want to share with you how we categorize the men and women here. You'd have to figure out for your organization, your ministry, or wherever you're at, how you are going to categorize. And this is how we do it. We have our first one is needs more focused help beyond. We call it needs relief. They need something beyond what we can do. So this is someone who comes in and they have a sort of medical issue that they can't take care of themselves. And they can't get up and go potty on their own. They can't do their own hygiene. Or someone who needs residential addiction recovery. The outpatient doesn't work for everybody. So they might need something a little bit deeper and more fulfilling. There's also those who, in here we have a special category that we do the least with, and that's level 3 sex offenders. We have youth center across the street. We have parents who bring their kids here on a regular basis. We legally can't serve them in that capacity. So they end up with this needs relief. Now those with the level 3, we have to dismiss them right away. We try to get them someplace, but there's not a lot we can do. But for the others, we build relations with nursing homes, for example, or the live-in residential, or one of those places. We say, how long do you need to get them into your place? And we try to get them in there as quickly as possible. Very few expectations on our part. We're going to get you there because you need something bigger and more prominent than what we can offer. Our second category is needs work. Now these are men and women who have already dealt with their addictions, their challenges. They don't know what they don't know yet, but they're ready to go to work. They've taken care of the big issues, the things that are going to make them lose a job. I know a lot of folks that we've been able to help get jobs, but then they relapse. They lose the job and they can't go on. So this is that category. They've already dealt with all that. They're less likely to relapse. And then they need work. So we have a work start job training program. We're going to pile them in with that right away. We're going to start to get to know who they are and help them find that dream job. Now, I don't want them just to get a job just for the paycheck. They might need to do that temporarily, but we're talking about needs work. We're trying to help them find their dream job, something that's going to be exciting for them. It's going to be something they're going to love to do. And then most of our people who come in here, and most of you that are in this room, you need a challenge. And it's tough to do, but there's this whole thing about no pressure, no diamonds. And the truth is that men and women coming here, I see diamonds inside of them. They don't always see it, they don't always know it's there, but I see diamonds inside of them. But I have to put a little pressure on them to make that come out. Because if there's no pressure, those diamonds can't come out. It's also a delicate process that our team works through, because if you put too much pressure, you crush it and end up with coal dust. Coal dust has some value, but not like diamonds. So we're going to need a challenge. So what we have here is we have a personalized contract for every person who comes in here. We get to know them individually and say, this is the next step, this is the next step, this is the next step. We help them come up with a plan to progress and succeed. And as long as they're succeeding, they continue to stay here. They need a challenge. Unfortunately, there's also a fourth group. Now this group is tears your heart apart. You don't like to have to get this, but they need tough love. And I really, again, I wish I didn't have this group. I wish I didn't have to categorize some of this place. But it's just the fact is, some people are just not ready for some life change. They have not figured out, when I use, I end up homeless. When I use, I end up losing my family. When I use, I lose my jobs. And I know that from my own experience when I had my addiction 30 years ago. I lost all that, but I didn't know that that's what's causing me to lose it. I thought it was everybody else's fault. But I came to this place, I understood it, and I got it. So they don't get it. So we're going to have tough love on them. This, again, is very challenging. We try to do it in a very loving way. We try to do that. Sometimes when you're being called out of stuff, you get aggressive and you get angry. Those things take place. So we're not denying that, but that's the other categorization. They need tough love. They can always come back. We have a process where they can come back at any time. They just got to meet with staff sometimes, or they may have to do some other things to get back in. But generally, there's always going to be a road back in. There's nobody you will ever meet that is a forever out person. Again, I got to caveat that with the level 3 sex offenders, we just don't have a place for them because of legal constraints. Everybody else we'll work with. So on this categorization, just kind of fine tune this conversation on categorization. Is, instead of asking what can't you do, we're going to ask what can you do. Instead of kind of a means test, a lack of means, just serve everybody just get what you want. We're going to say, what can you do? We're going to actually test you out. I'm going to challenge you, put that out on you. Show us what you can do. The income focused versus production centered. Would it be illness focused versus goal focused? We're centering in on what they can actually accomplish and what they can do. So that's categorization. And if I get through that with nobody throwing anything at me, I can probably do all right. Next thing we have is discernment. How do we figure out what category to put them in? This is going to be challenging. Now, as a faith-based organization, we openly and very deliberately invite God into that process. Help me figure this out. So the Holy Spirit says, give a shot, or whoa, a little warning. And sometimes we get in trouble when we ignore the warning. So we have that. But even if your organization isn't faith-based, hopefully if you happen to be a believer, you can still utilize those skills. I know you may not formally be able to do that. I understand those things. But discernment also comes from some experience. I've been doing this for 22 plus years, but other people have been doing other businesses, other organizations, and other opportunities to serve people. They got experience. They bring all that to the table, help us figure out how to best serve folks. There's also another thing that we do here that's a little unique. And sometimes I get pushback, I get kind of a ridicule for this part, but I think it's become an important part of what we do. It's called our panel. And the panelists are there for a couple weeks, and they meet with a panel of 3 guests and 2 staff, and they decide to continue your stay. And the truth is that all those men and women who are staying here, they have experiences too. They can bring that to our discernment table. It can help us figure out, is this right or is this wrong? What are we seeing? And the other area that panel helps out on, they did this. There's this real interesting experience that took place. They had a state fair. I think it was New York had a state fair somewhere. And they had a cow standing there. And they had this contest where you could go up and you could look at the cow and you say, I think this cow is going to be so many pounds of meat. And you put in $2 or $3, whatever it was. This is like early 1900s, so it probably wasn't much. And you put in your guess and you put in your $2 and you get to, whoever gets closest gets the meat. Kind of a cool contest. Maybe we should do one of those things again. I'd be all into that. But they have this whole contest. And when it gets all over with, the person who won actually wasn't all that close. But they were the closest, so they win. But there was a guy observing this, and he was kind of curious. He said, I wonder what's going on here. And so he took all those guesses, and he put them into a big pool, and he had to do this by hand. He didn't have a computer to do it. He didn't have he had to actually do real math and figure this all out. But he figured out the average. And understand that people putting in those bids, those guesses, some of them were like kids. They have no idea how much meat's going to come off that cow. And then you have experts. We're talking ranchers looking at this saying, I know what this is. It wasn't a rancher who actually won, by the way. Be interesting if he had, but no ranchers won. It was just some little old lady from the Midwest comes into New York and wins this thing. Beautiful thing. But he takes all those numbers, he adds all up, and figures out the average. The average was almost exact to the reality. So the truth is that 5 of them are going to be smarter than any one of us. One of us can make a mistake, but 5 of us are less likely to. Now, they can still make a mistake. We can still blow it. Our democracy is showing us that historically. But discernment, that's going to help us figure this stuff out. That's part of that discernment process. So our last 3, and then I'll be able to take some questions. The tragedy of American compassion again. That's our exchange, freedom, and God. Exchange, freedom, and God. So exchange. If one person is always the giver and one is always the taker, there's going to become a power dynamic that's going to take place. All of a sudden, I have the power. I can take that away or I can give it to you. That's one of the reasons I gave my daughter when she was a teenager, I gave her a cell phone so I could take it away when she was misbehaving. I eventually gave her car keys, and I said, I can take that away too. And I didn't have to do that a whole lot with her. Her brothers were different, but she was a good girl most of the time. But you give something. You also got to give them something they can give back, something they can be part of that whole process. Otherwise, they get stuck in victim mode. There's nothing I can do. I can't help. I don't have any of that. And this is where these marks of effective charity tie into the fact that it's not just organizations, not just business, not just ministries. It's also the people receiving the help need to be part of this process. We're inviting them in. That's why we invite our guests into the panel. It's why we have an exchange program here. We have a thing called GRM bucks. They like to call them Baldy bucks. Don't know why. It has my face on it, so that might explain that. But they actually use that. They work 6 hours a week for their room and board here. They get 3 meals a day and 7 nights of a hotel stay for $60 essentially. Then they can use extras they earn by that for clothing at our OG&E clothing closet. They can use extra bucks for getting toiletries and soap, shampoos, and extra things like that. And sometimes we have extra gifts. We have bikes sometimes we get. And they can buy a bike with those bucks, just like we would. You go to the store and you have it. We have other things that as we get donated, say, let's use that. Let's figure that out. How can we best serve these folks? And they can earn that and be part of it. So no longer are they getting anything, they've actually now earned it. When they're doing our work start job training program, they're actually earning bucks. They're actually earning, just like they get $10 an hour, which is better than most fast food places. To exchange. Again, our goal is to raise their value. We want them to see themselves as having value. My work that I'm doing right now, it means something. It's not just they're making me do it because they're mean to me. It's the work I'm doing, it has value. I mean, most of us might do our jobs if we weren't getting paid, but we need to get paid because we got to pay the bills. It's the same sort of thing with these folks. They would do it if they had to. If they can get paid for it, it feels better. Now, freedom. Now, I was born and raised in St. Louis, east of St. Louis. Now, have you ever seen the original Vacation movie where he gets pulled over, he gets his car all jacked up, and they graffiti his car, take the tires? That's my hometown. That's the kind of place I was born and raised in. I think that's why I like tough neighborhoods. But that's where I live. So every once in a while, though, I go back and visit with my family and friends in St. Louis. It's something I do about 3 or 4 times a year. And when I drive there, I got freedom. I go all over the place. I visit all my friends. I go to all the places, the restaurants or theaters or wherever I want. I can do all of it. But sometimes I fly. I find out flying can be cheaper sometimes. So I fly to St. Louis. The problem is that when I get there, I'm dependent on whoever has a car at that moment. And when I'm dependent on them, I don't get to visit all the places I really want. I don't get to go see Grandma the way I would like to. I have to go when they say it's time to go visit Grandma. All those things, that dependency takes away my freedom. And the same thing we're talking about a mark of effective charity. It's going to be more effective if we can give them as many options as we possibly can. And all of our programs, everything we do always has some limitations. We want to expand that as much as we possibly can. And you have this, you can do this, you can do this. And if they can do those things, then they have the freedom to choose a home. They have a choice to choose a job. They can choose a neighborhood. They might be able to choose a city. All those things, the more freedom we can give, the better. We want to try to avoid dependency. It's really important that we're trying to do that if we're going to be effective. So we're going to talk about the powers of dependency, the steps to becoming dependency. So let's say you do see that person over by Chick-fil-A who's just standing there not enjoying that chicken. It's such a great meal. The first time you give them some money, they're going to be appreciating it. Like, oh, thank you, Paul, for giving me this money. This is fantastic. It's really awesome. I really appreciate it. The second time, though, they're going to see Paul coming. This is Paul, by the way, just in case you didn't point on my fingers. They're going to see Paul come and say, oh, good, last time Paul was here, he gave me some money. And they're anticipating it. They're looking at you expectantly. Yes, this is about to happen. I'm about to get some more money. They anticipate it. And now, then they expect it. oh, Paul's coming, I'm definitely going to get it this time. There's no doubt in my mind, and anticipating it may or may not happen, but expectation, it is going to happen. I'm expecting it to happen. And if Paul doesn't do it, they hate him. He hates all homeless people. That would become the mindset. That would be the verbiage that would come out of that. Eventually they're entitled. I deserve this. Now, this community needs me to stand out here and hold up the panhandling sign. Have you ever seen The Fisher King? There actually is a story of a guy who actually says that. I am a moral traffic cop right here. That is actually a mindset of entitlement. And then they're dependent. They can't survive without us giving that money. But the other side is just as dangerous. For those of us who are the givers, that danger is still just there. The first time we give someone, we're exhilarated. Like, yes, look at me. I'm a good guy. I gave them some money. And this was my vision of helping people who are homeless and in poverty. That was my thing. Like, yes, I'm so excited I get to help them. I feel good about that. And the second time, I'm serving a purpose. I have fulfilled what God has called me to do. I am fulfilling a purpose. The third time, I'm necessary. If I don't start doing this, this person's not going to make it. I am needed. Now, needed feels pretty good. Now, I raised my kids not to be needed into their adulthood, and when they actually didn't need me anymore, I had this whole feeling of loss. Really? They don't need me. You know, helping my daughter move, they were giving me directions on what to carry and what to fix. It was a whole different world. I was no longer needed. And then I'm essential. Whole society's going to fall apart if I don't do this. And then I'm paternal. I'm like their father. I got to take care of all these people. That's the danger that can start to take place. But it goes much beyond that. FDR, President Roosevelt, said the continued dependence on relief induces a spiritual and moral disintegration fundamentally destructive to the national fiber. To dole out relief in this way is to administer a narcotic, a subtle destroyer of the human spirit. We need to help build up the human spirit. We need to instilling hope. And when they're dependent, we're not able to do that. We need to help them get past that level. So our last one that we're going to talk about today, the seventh mark that he has, again, it's not in order of what's important, just alphabetical. G just happens to come after F, is God. There's a faith component. Now I want to share a little bit, is that I believe all people are physical, mental, spiritual, and social. They all have all those components. And oftentimes we ignore the spiritual component. We're saying that if you want to be really effective, you can't ignore that component. You have to address and minister to that piece of them as well. At the mission, people say, well, I don't want to go there and just throwing the gospel at me. They're forcing me into all this. The truth is that I did the math, and less than 5% of your time staying at the mission is focused in strictly on faith-based elements. Everything kind of covers that. Faith kind of covers everything we do. But there's 5% that's actually focused, deliberate. Everybody's going to be part of doing it. And if your personalized program might include more. But as a group, we're doing a little bit different than that. So God is an important component of all that. So as this is up, I'm going to take some questions. But I want to invite you, here we have it on August 6th. I'm inviting you because, again, coming back to that panel discussion, and all of us are smarter than any one of us. We've been studying this book, When Helping Hurts. And you might have missed it. If you haven't been here, then you've missed this book study this whole time. You can still get a copy of the book and go. I'll give you a copy if you need it. But this book has really shaped our thinking in a lot of ways. But we're going to be creating some future programs that are going to come out of our study of this book. And so the more voices are going to be at this next book club. It's 1 hour of coming in and just helping us figure this out, sort through it. I have some very specific questions as we develop one specific program that's going to come out of this book. We'd love to have your voice at that. So that's August 6th. You can sign up for it. The email's there. Or the easiest way is to go to grmok.org. That's our new website, grmok.org. And then the events will tell you, and you can sign up for it there. And October 1st, we're going to have a new book. And if you want to find out about that, get a free copy of that book, you got to come to this one on August 6th. But I will tell you, October 1st, we're doing something that's going to be different than just poverty work. It's going to be community building. And I think we're coming into a season of our community where we're going to need some community building. And we're doing October, November, December. It's a 3-month book club for that. So we're going to be addressing issues of politics, particularly how we can all work together in this. It's going to be a challenging season.